Picture this. You're scrolling through Zillow on a Tuesday night, coffee in hand, doing what most of us do when we're quietly terrified about the future. And then you see it. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a cracked concrete driveway, beige siding that hasn't been painted since the early 2000s, a kitchen that still has those old oak cabinets with the brass handles your grandmother used to have. The yard is flat. The roof is plain. There is absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing, about this house that says money. The listing price? $1.2 million. And it already has multiple offers. While you're sitting there with your jaw on the floor wondering if you missed something, I'm going to show you the real data, the actual market forces, and the cold hard truth about why perfectly ordinary-looking homes now carry price tags that would have seemed like a joke 10 years ago. And the answer, I promise you, is going to completely change how you see real estate in 2026. Stay until the end, because I'm breaking down location economics, the housing shortage crisis, the lock-in effect, the truth about who's actually buying these homes, and exactly what you should do whether you're buying, selling, or just trying to make sense of this madness. Let's be clear about what kind of home we're discussing here. We're not talking about a renovated Victorian with chef's kitchen finishes. We're not talking about a penthouse condo with skyline views. We're not talking about a newly built modern farmhouse with vaulted ceilings and heated floors. We're talking about a regular, plain, nothing special single-family home. The kind that blends into a suburban street so completely that you drive past it 100 times without a second glance. 3 bedrooms, modest square footage, maybe a 2-car garage, a layout that hasn't been updated in 15 years. That house in the right zip code in 2026 costs over $1 million. And here's the part that makes it even more disorienting. In over 550 U.S. cities, that's not even considered a luxury purchase. According to Zillow data, the median home value has now crossed the $1 million mark in 550 cities across this country. 550. And that number keeps climbing every single year. Both the coastal cities and the inland markets are being affected. Both old housing stock and newer builds are being pulled into this price range. But the reason it's happening, and what's actually driving it, is completely different depending on where you are. That's what we need to understand. 550 cities. And that number went up again this year. Now, I could stop here and tell you the market is broken and send you on your way. But that's not why you're watching this. You're watching because you want the full picture. Why the shortage exists, who's actually buying these homes, what the lock-in effect is doing to inventory, and where $1 million still gets you something real in 2026. All of that is coming in the next few minutes, with real data, not speculation. If that's what you're here for, subscribe and hit the like button so this reaches the people who need it. Now, let's get into the actual mechanics of why this happened. Let's start with the biggest factor, because this is where everything becomes crystal clear. The number one reason a plain-looking house costs $1.2 million has almost nothing to do with the house itself. It has everything to do with where that house sits. A Redfin agent in Palm Beach recently put it in a way that I think is worth repeating. Asterisk the $1 million mark used to signal true luxury. Now, in many parts of the country, it simply means the price of a typical home. Asterisk let that land for a second. In San Francisco right now, the median home price is hovering around $1.6 million. That is not a mansion. That is not a luxury estate. That is the average home in that city. The median, meaning half the homes there cost more than that. In Los Angeles, New York, and parts of New Jersey, $1 million buys you access. Access to the job market, the school district, the neighborhood's transit connections, its established infrastructure. The house is almost an afterthought. You're paying for the coordinates on the map, not the structure sitting on top of them. According to the Realtor.com March 2026 Luxury Housing Report, 13 U.S. markets now qualify as pure luxury, where more than half of all active listings are priced above $1 million. In Nantucket, Massachusetts, 99% of active listings clear the 7-figure mark. 99%. The entry-level home and the luxury home have become the same thing. And this isn't just a coastal phenomenon anymore. Half of all U.S. states now have at least one city where the average entry-level home crosses $1 million. The geography of this problem has expanded far beyond what most people realize. Now let's talk about the engine behind all of this, because this is the big one, and it has been building for decades. The United States has a housing shortage that current estimates place somewhere between 1.5 million and 5.5 million homes below what the country actually needs. That is not a rounding error. That is a structural failure that has been compounding for years, and it is now showing up in your Zillow search results as sticker shock. California alone has a shortfall of approximately 2 million homes. New York is sitting at nearly 1 million homes short of what its population needs. And here's the policy detail that makes it worse. In California, 96% of available land is zoned exclusively for single-family homes. You cannot build dense housing where people desperately need to live. The land is there. The demand is there. The legal framework to actually solve it is not. And in 2026, building more homes has gotten harder, not easier. Tariffs introduced this year are actively driving up the cost of construction materials. Changes to immigration policy are shrinking the available workforce that actually builds these homes. The Redfin chief economist put it directly: it will take a concerted political and industry-wide effort to close the supply gap and bring costs down to a normal level. More people who need homes, fewer homes available, higher prices. That is the equation. And right now, nothing in the system is moving fast enough to change it. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the same forces creating this shortage are also quietly creating the biggest geographic opportunity in modern real estate. Stay with me. Here's where most housing videos stop. They show you the scary number. They show you the map. They say the market is tough, and they move on. We're not doing that. Because the shortage, the lock-in effect, the rent versus by math, the markets where $1 million still means something, none of that has been touched yet. And every piece of it connects directly to a decision you may be facing right now or within the next 12 months. If you want all of it, subscribe and hit the like button before we go further. This is exactly the kind of content I put out every week. No fluff, no panic, just the information you actually need to move with clarity in this market. Now, let's talk about the engine behind all of this, because this next part is the one that changes how you see everything. Here is something that almost nobody talks about when they're complaining about housing prices, and it's one of the most important dynamics in the 2026 market. During the pandemic years, millions of homeowners locked in mortgage rates of 2.5% to 3.5%. Some got even lower. Today's 30-year fixed rate is sitting around 6.8% to 7%. So these homeowners are frozen in place, not by circumstance, but by math. If they sell their current home and buy something new, they lose that golden rate forever and replace it with today's. Their monthly payment could nearly double on a similar-sized home. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like in real dollars. And the number is going to stop you cold. So they stay. They don't downsize. They don't trade up. They don't move closer to the kids. They sit tight and protect that rate like it's a family heirloom. This is called the lock-in effect, and it is draining the housing market of the inventory it desperately needs. The homes that should be coming back on a market, the ones that would give first-time buyers a fighting chance, are being held by people who simply cannot afford to let them go. The result? As of early 2026, homes are sitting on the market an average of 66 days before selling, up from 55 days in 2025. That's good news for buyers. You have more time to negotiate now than you did 2 years ago. But don't confuse a slower market with a cheaper market. According to Redfin, home prices have increased about 1% year over year in recent months. Slower growth, but still growth. The crash many people are waiting for? Most economists say it isn't coming, at least not in 2026. Let me give you real examples, not theory, of what this money is buying people across different cities right now. These are based on current Redfin and Zillow listing data, and the contrast is genuinely stunning. In San Francisco, $1.2 million gets you roughly 900 to 1,100 square feet, maybe 2 bedrooms. Probably needs updating. The kitchen and bathrooms are likely original. You share walls with neighbors. The street parking situation is a daily adventure. But you're in San Francisco. That address is the asset. In Austin, Texas, that same $1.2 million gets you a 3,500 square foot home. New construction, open floor plan, primary suite with a walk-in closet, backyard, neighborhood with good schools, modern finishes. You are buying a genuinely impressive home. In Charlotte, North Carolina, $1.2 million puts you in outright luxury territory. Custom build, pool, multi-car garage, more space than most families would ever need. This is what the Realtor.com data confirms. Fast-growing Sun Belt and Midwest markets are delivering newer, larger properties for under $1 million, while established coastal metros are selling smaller, older homes for significantly more. The same dollar amount, completely different outcomes. And that gap is almost entirely explained by location, not by the quality of what's been built. Now, zoom out for a second, because what's happening at street level in Austin and San Francisco is also being driven by forces much larger than either of those cities. Here is another layer most people miss entirely, and it matters more than most housing conversations let on. Globally, luxury real estate is only moving in one direction, up. The Knight Frank Wealth Report published earlier this year found that luxury home prices across 100 major markets grew 3.2% in the past year, actually outpacing mainstream housing price growth. The wealthy are growing wealthier, and they are parking that wealth in real estate. Dubai saw luxury property prices climb 25% in 2025 alone. $1 million in Monaco buys you approximately 172 square feet. That's not a typo. 172 square feet. This matters for American buyers because that global capital doesn't stay offshore. It flows into U.S. real estate markets, especially in coastal cities, bidding up prices at every level. When the top of the market gets pushed higher by global wealth, it compresses everything below it upward too. And here's the part the comment section always wants addressed, because if you've watched any housing video in the past 3 years, you've seen it. Asterisk, what about BlackRock? What about hedge funds buying everything? Asterisk. Here's the honest answer. Institutional investors, hedge funds, corporations, iBuyers do own a portion of the single-family rental market, and their buying activity grew significantly between 2020 and 2023. But they account for a smaller share of total purchases than the narrative suggests. Roughly 3% of single-family home purchases nationally, according to recent data. They are a real factor, particularly in Sun Belt markets like Atlanta and Phoenix, where they concentrated heavily. But they're not the primary driver of why your Zillow search looks the way it does. The shortage, the lock-in effect, and location economics are doing most of that work. Institutional buyers pour fuel on an already burning fire. They didn't start it. The $1 million plain beige house isn't priced in a vacuum. It's the combined result of all of these forces pressing on the same market simultaneously. Let's be completely honest about the human cost of what's happening here, because we sometimes look at price statistics and forget there are real people on the other side. Per Zillow data, the median age of a first-time homebuyer in the United States is now 35 years old. A generation ago, people were buying their first homes in their late 20s. That window has shifted nearly a full decade because the entry point is that much harder to reach. According to the National Association of Realtors starter home values, the entry-level homes, the ones first-time buyers are targeting, have grown 54.1% over the past 5 years. That's faster than the average home. The cheapest homes got more expensive the fastest. The people with the least financial headroom are competing in the most inflated segment of the market. And now, here are those numbers I promised you earlier. A $1.2 million home with a standard 20% down payment leaves you with a roughly $960,000 mortgage. At today's rate of around 6.8%, that is approximately $7,500 to $8,000 per month, before property taxes, insurance, or a single repair bill. In many of those same cities where that's the going rate for a plain 3-bedroom, you can rent a comparable home for $200 to $3,800 a month. That is a gap of $4,000 to $5,000 every single month. Not a small difference, not a rounding error. $4,000 to $5,000 month after month that you either spend building equity in an overpriced asset or keep in your pocket while you wait for a smarter entry point. That is the math that has pushed renting into being the financially smarter short-term choice in high-cost markets. Not laziness, not a lack of ambition. Pure arithmetic. And it explains exactly why the National Association of Realtors found that 76% of Americans currently say it's a bad time to buy a house. Everything we've covered so far, the shortage, the lock-in trap, the rent versus buy math, the wealth effect pushing prices at every level. That was context. What I'm about to show you is the part that actually changes what you do next. Specific markets, specific numbers, specific moves, depending on whether you're trying to buy, rent strategically, or protect the equity you already have. But first, 2 seconds. If this video has given you more clarity on the housing market than the last 10 things you read about it, subscribe right now and hit the bell, because this is the standard I hold myself to every single week on this channel. And the next video is already in the works. Okay, here's where the real value still lives in 2026. And here's how to get in front of it before everyone else figures it out. Now I want to give you something that actually feels like insight rather than doom, because this video is not meant to leave you feeling helpless. The 2026 housing market is deeply uneven, and that unevenness is your advantage if you know how to read it. Here's the frame I want you to use. Think about where Austin, Texas was in 2012. Nobody outside of Texas was paying attention. Prices were reasonable. Growth was accelerating quietly. Then everyone figured it out, and the prices followed. The cities I'm about to mention are where Austin was 10 years ago, before the magazines wrote about them, before the tech workers showed up, before the listings started disappearing in 48 hours. Brunswick, Georgia, up 7.1% year over year. Grand Island, Nebraska, up 6.3%. Glens Falls, New York, up 5.9%. These are not random small towns. These are markets with genuine job growth, infrastructure investment, and incoming population. The same recipe that made Austin what it is today. The difference is the window is still open. And at the broader level, markets across Texas, Florida, and parts of the Carolinas are still delivering real, tangible value at the $1 million mark. Cities like Dallas, Tampa, and Charlotte give you actual square footage, modern finishes, and real amenities. In some of these Sun Belt metros, the entry point for the top 10% of listings starts around $893,000, and you're getting a newer build with genuine upgrades. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles or San Francisco, that same million barely clears the entry point for a home that needs work. You are not getting the same product. You are not even in the same conversation. The only common denominator is the number on the price tag. The idea of what $1 million should buy is no longer fixed. If you're willing to look beyond the cities everyone is already looking at, you are looking at opportunity, not consolation. Let's get specific. No generic advice. Real talk for wherever you are in this market. If you're a buyer, the market is giving you slightly more breathing room than it has in years. Homes are sitting an average of 66 days before selling. Use that time. Negotiate. Get inspections. Don't panic buy into a market you don't fully understand. But don't sit back waiting for a dramatic crash either, because the structural shortage makes that extremely unlikely. The most powerful shift you can make is to stop thinking about the house and start thinking obsessively about geography. The house is replaceable. The location is permanent. And right now, the location that fits your life and your budget may not be the one you've been imagining. Be open to that. If you're a renter, renting is currently more affordable than buying in every major American city on a monthly basis. A $7,500 mortgage payment versus $3,500 in rent for a comparable home. That is not a small difference. And choosing to rent while you position yourself strategically is not a failure. It is good math. If you already own your equity is one of the most powerful financial positions you could be in right now. Over a quarter of all U.S. properties are now valued above $500,000. And the equity in those homes represents genuine compounding wealth. Protect it. Understand your local market. And don't assume appreciation continues at the same pace. Tariffs, workforce constraints, and economic uncertainty are all real headwinds going into the second half of 2026. Here's what I want you to walk away understanding, because I think it's the most important layer of this entire conversation. The plain beige house that costs $1.2 million is not a fluke. It is a symptom. It is a symptom of policy failures at the city, state, and federal level, of zoning laws that were never updated to meet the needs of a growing country, of a construction industry that was never given the tools to build fast enough, and of a market that was never designed to serve the average buyer in 2026. The national conversation is slowly beginning to shift. Some cities are revisiting their zoning laws. Housing reform legislation is being debated in Washington. Inventory is beginning to build in certain markets, finally giving buyers some room. But progress is slow. And in the meantime, somewhere in America right now, a buyer with solid income, good credit, and years of savings walked up to a plain beige house with a cracked driveway and oak cabinets with brass handles. And they paid $1.2 million for it. And they were grateful to get it. That is the human reality behind every statistic in this video. And now you understand exactly why I got here. Is the housing shortage real? Yes. Between 1.5 and 5.5 million homes short nationally, with no fast fix in sight. Are prices going to crash? No. Growth is slowing to about 1% annually, but the structural shortage prevents any real free fall. Does location determine value more than the house itself? Completely. The zip code is the product. The house is what sits on it. What about institutional buyers like BlackRock? Real factor, but overblown. They account for roughly 3% of purchases. The shortage and lock-in effect are doing the heavy lifting. Is renting a failure in 2026? No. At $7,500 a month to own versus $3,500 to rent a comparable home is often the smarter short-term math. Is there still opportunity? Yes, in secondary and emerging markets that haven't been discovered yet. That's where the edge lives. Should first-time buyers give up? Never. But they need better information, geographic flexibility, and a willingness to move before the crowd does. The real question was never just why the plain house costs $1.2 million. The real question is what you do with that knowledge. And now you have everything you need to answer it. The data is clear. The plain-looking house that costs $1.2 million is not a scam, and it's not a mystery. It is the result of location economics, a decades-long housing shortage, millions of homeowners locked into 3% rates who won't let go, and global capital competing for a finite number of desirable addresses. Institutional investors add pressure. Zoning laws block solutions. And construction costs in 2026 make building the way out harder than ever. But knowing all of this changes your position. You can't negotiate with a market you don't understand. You can't find opportunity in a landscape you've never mapped. And you can't make a confident decision when you're operating on fear and confusion instead of information. The housing market in 2026 is hard. It is genuinely, historically hard for a lot of people. But it is not impossible to navigate if you're willing to look at it honestly, think geographically, and move with strategy instead of emotion. And that is exactly what this channel is built for. Look, if you made it here, you already know something most people don't. You know why the plain house costs $1.2 million. You know what's actually driving it. You know where the opportunity still lives, and you know what the math actually says about buying versus renting right now in 2026. That's not nothing. Most people are still out here operating on vibes and headlines. So here's what I want from you before you close this tab. First, subscribe and hit the bell. Because next week I'm going back into one of those emerging markets I named and breaking down exactly what a first-time buyer with a $400,000 budget can actually do there right now. You don't want to miss that one. Second, drop your city in the comments. Tell me one thing. Does $1 million buy you something real where you live? Or does it buy you beige siding, brass cabinet handles, and the privilege of sharing a wall with your neighbor? I read every single comment. In your city? It might be the next video. I'll see you there.